and welcome to the 2023 Leading Transformational Change Forum, sponsored by C4C, the Consortium for Change. I am Michelle Stowe, Executive Coach and founder of Skyrocket Coaching. I work with nonprofit leaders and their teams to achieve excellence and fully live into their missions. Today, I have the honor of introducing my C4C colleague and author of one of my favorite books to share with clients, Ashish Kothari. Ashish is the founder of Happiness Squad, a company focused on helping individuals and organizations unleash the power of happiness and well-being to achieve their full potential. As a partner in McKinsey's leadership practice, Ashish served as the co-dean for the Centered Leadership and Adaptability and Resilience programs. He combines over 2 decades of consulting experience with formal training as an ontological coach and has helped thousands of leaders and their organizations succeed by building new mindsets and capabilities. Ashish is a lifelong student of human thriving, having read over 450 books and studied the teachings of world-renowned experts across spirituality, philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience. Ashish's most recent book, Hardwired for Happiness, is a must-read for anyone interested in proven practices to overcome stress and live your best life. We are so fortunate to have Ashish join us today to discuss how to unlock your full potential by making happiness your competitive edge. Please drop in any questions you have for Ashish in the chat or Q&A. And so without further delay, over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Michelle, for such a warm introduction, and so lovely to be with you all who are tuning in to listen. So listen, today at the end of our time, which we have 30 minutes, I want to convince so many of you around why we want to make happiness our competitive edge and how it can be and why there is no better time than now to actually do it. And so let me pull up a page that highlights and makes the case for that for you. So there are 2 different cases here on the left and the right that I would make, and I would invite you to consider around why there is no time better than now to actually invest in organizational flourishing. What I would say to any executives tuning in, think about left as a me search moment. Your targets for most executives I coach have never been harder. The conditions under which they have to deliver it has never been harder either. They, in a moment when they want people to engage, to lean in, to be more creative, they're facing a workforce that's exhausted, stressed, and burnt out. It's disengaged, and they themselves are feeling the fatigue of 2 to 3 years post-COVID of having navigated and addressed the ever-rising pressure from shareholders. So my invitation, dear friends, is the following. In a moment when you're working harder than ever before, what option do we have to achieve more, which we are asked to do, if not to be more? Because there's not much left in the gas tank to do more. The right-hand side is what we know from all the research over the last several years around flourishing. If we truly lean in and take well-being and flourishing from the domains of employee benefits, it topically falls into what Alex Edmonds, a professor in LBS, calls a splitting the pie mentality. To truly a competitive edge, lean in and run it like a transformation, like you do any other transformation. In effect, if we invest in our people to grow the pie, those companies that do that achieve unbelievable returns. 2x higher stock market returns, 21% more profitable, 30% more productivity, 3x more creativity, and 65% more less employee turnover. Now, for the longest time, there was debate about, are these correlational or are they really causational? So one, I would highlight Alex Edmonds' work in London Business School that clearly studied causation, effects of investing in employee satisfaction and flourishing. And to make it even more clear, I wanted to highlight for you a model that I invite you to consider what these numbers look for you. To anybody who's done operational transformation work, this chart should be as familiar as I don't know, you see this every day, right? It's an OEE chart. It's a chart of losses. Any good operations person, and I grew up in the field of operations for 20 years, driving lean and other transformations, knows that there are three types of losses in any operation. Availability, the machine is down because it hasn't been planned. Performance, the machine is producing 800 parts instead of 1,000. And quality, 10 out of 1,000 parts are defective, need rework. Well, our human assets suffer from the same losses. Availability losses come in the form of attrition, which is around 8 to 12%, or absenteeism, which is even higher. Performance losses happen at the individual and at the team level, from low engagement, from multitasking and back-to-back meetings. They come at the team level from low psychological safety, also from high degree of resentment and resignation that comes in between departments. And quality losses come from decision biases, and also the fact that people are distracted because of multitasking. And these show up in terms of poor decisions, decisions taken with not enough information, and of course, psychological safety drives that too. So my invitation, dear friends, is build this graph for you. I have now had this conversation with over 200 executives. And when we actually build the model using data, very rarely do we find that we are anywhere more than 30, if not 35% at max of human assets in terms of the true potential of what's possible versus where we are achieving. Now, there are some folks who would say, well, that is kind of crazy to talk about humans and assets. Humans are so much more, and I couldn't agree more. But I also, in the same vein, invite you to consider that our current approaches for performance management actually don't even treat humans as assets. We treat humans as asses, donkeys. Carrots and sticks are the predominant measure through which most organizations try and incentivize performance. We're going to give you bonuses, we're going to fire you. So I would say that if we actually start treating people as assets, that's going from crawling to walking. Once we do that, we can truly start leveraging and unleashing the true magic that exists in humans, because they are unbelievable sources of creativity. But that's a run state. We have to learn to walk first, which is just like for every team, we look at performance, let's look at the health of the team. How are they doing? What's the level of stress? What's the level of meaning? What's the level of psychological safety with which they operate? So hopefully that helps you kind of in your mind make the case for why this is a really big deal. And we actually need to take a different approach than what has been done so far in truly investing in flourishing, in happiness, so that we can rise to the challenge of our times and achieve more, not just by doing more, but by being more. So what does being more look like? We've built two models at Happiness Squad that are at the heart of transforming our organizations and helping individuals build the capabilities. They both pay homage to nature. The left take inspiration from the sun, the life-giving force. Just like we need the energy for the sun for anything to work, the sunflower is the model that talks about how, as individuals, we can build practices into our life that allow us to be at our fullest potential and shine at our brightest. A sunflower, also as a flower, always chooses to follow the sun. Similarly, happiness is a choice. It's not that we don't have suffering in our day-to-day, but we can choose how we want to meet it. And that's why we say happiness is a choice. And these 9 practices will talk a bit more around how they help us truly be happier and more resilient and more adaptable to navigate what comes our way as individuals. The second model, which is a model for people leaders, is around organizational skills. And that is Pearl. And in that, we pay homage to water, the sea. The second important factor without which we can't really exist. Pearl is a beautiful thing because, if you think about oysters create pearls from irritants that get into them, sand particles. And they have this amazing ability to convert that into something of value. Well, I don't know about you, but every organization I've worked at was filled with daily irritants. They seem to come at ever increasing rates today in terms of higher performance pressures from the board and from the stockholders, economic conditions that are harder, disagreements with suppliers and customers and employees and bosses. We have so many irritants in our day-to-day life. And this model is about 5 skills that if we can build into our people leaders, they can truly reshape the way we work, how we work, and why we work into opportunities of growth for all of us. So that instead of burning out, we can truly operate at a higher level of collective intelligence. Those 2 models, when combined together and truly integrated into the fabric of the organization, give us an opportunity to take well-being and flourishing to end-of-the-line activities that we do through, chief happiness officers and chief well-being officers, and truly weave it into what we do every day. It's no different than any quality revolution or safety revolutions that we've had in the past, where we move those functions from the end of the line into products and into identities of human beings. So let's talk about this first one, which is the sunflower, given the amount of time that we have. Now, why hardwired for happiness? And why do we really need to lean into this? Why is happiness not something that's easy? Well, to really understand that, we have to kind of go a little bit back in our history and recognize the core sense-making vehicle through which we experience the world, our brain. You see, we evolved over millions of years. Our brains evolved over millions of years, not to keep us happy, but to keep us safe. They're unbelievable prediction-making machines that are truly tuned in to sense threat and be able to trigger us to say, hey, watch out, take action. And they do it through the amygdala, which creates a stress response in terms of fight, flight, or freeze, and pushes us into that action. In that moment, our reasoning part of the brain, the neocortex, is bypassed. Our focus is on the individual, on the actual threat, and everything else becomes second nature to us at that point. That is not relevant. Our focus is the primary threat. Now, you can imagine how powerful that is for physical threats. Unfortunately, our brains have no way of detecting psychological threats from physical ones. And so the same pattern repeats itself 6, 8, 10 times in a day. When we get that email that an order is delayed, when we get an email from an upset customer around the part that was not working, or the next higher level target when we are just finishing delivering the prior quota. Unable to be able to get enough coping in the way and swimming in adrenaline and cortisol all day long, we are getting more and more hardwired for these responses, and we're getting hardwired for fear. What is not helping is that the complexity of our environment is getting higher and higher. And so there are more of these incidents that are coming at us. So when I researched, I was looking for how we can truly rewire our brains away from fear to something else, from self to connection, from scarcity to abundance. And in my research, these are the 9 practices that we found that were at the heart of the sunflower that are in my book, Hardwired for Happiness. Let me take a moment to walk you through these. At the heart of the sunflower is awareness. Know thyself. You see, there is so little that is possible if we don't know ourselves. How can we define our purpose if it's not around what we want versus what others expect of us, which is how most people do it? To be mindful, which is one of the practices, requires us to know where our brains are, where our attention is. If we are not aware whether it's in the past or in the future, how can we bring it to the present? Gratitude, which is one of the practices, which is so powerful because it rewires the negativity bias of our brain, is about noticing the abundance that is all around us. We have so much. To give you an example, when something is not, if we are suffering, let's say we stubbed our toe or hurt our back, and somebody asked us, how are we? We are very quick to point that our back is hurting or our toe is hurting. We define in microscopic detail what's wrong. But if nothing is wrong, we say we are good. I'm healthy. I'm grateful for being healthy. There are over 10,000 different things in our body that can be wrong. And if in a moment that they didn't go right, like the fact that if we lost sight, the fact if we lost our ability to hear, or something went wrong with if we developed a heart disease, or we had an accident and we lost a limb or hurt a limb, any one of these, when they are good, we describe them in a macro way. So gratitude is about noticing all the good things in our life, not just in our health, but in our relationships, things people do for us, the jobs that we hold, the technology that we benefit from today. It's about truly developing that eye for abundance. Same, without self-awareness, it's very hard to address some of the difficult emotions that we cover in the Petal Master Your Emotions. Those emotions of anger and resentment and anxiety and fear and shame and guilt. These emotions we usually dub as negative. We don't want them. They are not us, but they are so powerful when they arise in us. It's our emotions that are riding us. We lose our ability to take actions thoughtfully. When we become aware of the effects of these on our body, they can act as cues for us to calm our nervous systems down and to bring our thinking back online and take action differently. The other practices all depend on self-awareness too, and I'll just cover them briefly for you. Fueling up compassion is about truly creating our own positivity. When we give, we get so much back. And so really generating some of the positive emotions from within, compassion and optimism. Well-being is about making sure we are at our best physically, mentally, and spiritually. We have our batteries charged and we operate in a way that allow us to continuously renew versus be completely depleted at the end of the day. Community is about building and investing in relationships that continue to nurture us and we nurture. In one of the longest studies on flourishing, one of the biggest drivers of quality of life was the quality of relationships, as found at the Harvard study. And the last one is about living intentionally. Look, we have so much coming at us that most of us spend our lives living accidentally, continuously responding to what needs attention or somebody who's shouting the loudest. Living intentionally is about really setting that intention on how we want to be today, but also be intentional around where we want to go, what's our why, and what are the things that we need to focus on so we do them first. The important things so they don't become urgent, and really moving anything that's not important and urgent out of our lives. So those 9 practices are the practices that I found across close to 500 different books that I read. They were the practices that showed up in every spiritual tradition. They showed up in Buddhism, Yoga Sutras, they showed up in Taoism, but they also showed up in Quran, in Islam, they showed up in Judaism, they showed up in Christianity. The Stoics talked about it. These, by the way, we've known for thousands of years. In the last 20 years, the field of positive psychology validates the effect of every one of them in shifting our experience. And the field of neuroscience correlates shifts in our brain neural pathways when we live into these practices. The power of these practices is immense. And my invitation, dear friends, is if we do not shift and make these into habits so that we can go from knowing to doing, we cannot be happier because there is just too much going and our circuits for fear are so overloaded with all the conflicts in the world, with economic uncertainties, with the ecological disasters that are constantly getting more and more. We truly have to take charge and master our inner worlds if we have to thrive in the external world. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to help those we lead do that too. So that is the sunflower. Now, in order to do that, we have to rely on the science of habit formation. And so I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that if you are interested in how you can make this happen, you can come check out our website. We created a happiness program based on the science of habit formation that in 5 minutes or less, organizations and teams can truly lean into this to go from knowing to doing and make happiness their competitive edge. Those were some of the thoughts I had for you all today, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have via the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashish. Appreciate your review of this model and of the science behind all of it. We do have some questions in the chat for you. The first is from Victoria. She asks, in our day-to-day, how do we handle those who are not working toward understanding themselves and choosing happiness?
I think that's a beautiful question, Victoria. And I say the journey of 1,000 steps starts from the first step, which is me, which is ourselves. When we encounter those who might not be where we are towards understanding themselves or choosing happiness, we can start by asking them the questions that invite them to reflect. We can start by reflecting and sharing our own stories of what we are learning that is making a huge impact on our lives. The journey starts from within. I think if we meet with an open heart, that energy permeates the other.
Thank you, Ashish. Another question we've received. When you talk about defining your purpose, I've struggled to find ways to live a purpose-filled life in a way that also generates revenue, right? And there's that balance of wanting to live purpose and make a living. How do you advise individuals to find that peace for themselves?
So another beautiful question, Michelle, because look, there are so many who leave their jobs searching for meaning, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are others who just are, they're stuck. There's a level of disillusionment and hopelessness, And then there are so many others for whom the job is nothing but a way to earn a paycheck. And I say, what a loss. Work is what we do 1/3 of our lives, right? It's the largest amount of time we spend during the week. If all it is a way of surviving, despite all that we have, that is such a big loss. That's a loss for the individual, it's a loss for the organization. So how do we actually do this, right? And I think the answer lies in the model itself. Look, Ikigai, from those who are familiar, has 4 key components. What do I love? What am I good at? What the world needs? And what is it willing to pay for, right? 4 components. So first, if you have a job, the chances are pretty high that 3 out of the 4 are already in place, right? If your company makes money, it's probably producing something of value to the world. And it's something that the world is willing to pay real money for, because otherwise they won't be able to pay you. And if they hired you and you've spent time in that, you probably have some strengths that support, and you are ahead of others in that strength, right? So 3 out of the 4 are already there. So isn't it easier to integrate what we love into our work? Again, we can start by saying, hey, I'm an engineer, but I really like innovation. Let's take initiative and reach out to the marketing department or product development and say, hey, I'd like to be involved in this, right? Volunteer. Or I'll give you an example. For one of my clients, he used to go, he worked as a foreman, as a frontline supervisor in a plant. And every Thursday, he used to leave early because he used to coach the kids' baseball. His kids were all grown up, but he used to love coaching the baseball. And, the plant manager noticed this, and as part of our work we were doing, actually asked him, why do you coach? And he says, I love it. Like, it's, your kids are not there. I love coaching. And he said, why can't you coach here? And he said, well, my job is running this machine. Like, that's not my job. And he said, what stops you? And they created a program where every person who joined actually got a chance to work with him as a coach. So my first point for that, Michelle, is find what you love and figure out a way to bring it into what you're doing. Really, really important, right? Because if we can infuse meaning in what we do every day, we all benefit. We benefit because the work all of a sudden starts to give us that energy to handle no matter what comes our way. That energy is highly contagious. And organizations benefit. We know more engaged employees are so much more productive. So as leaders, it's our job to help people make meaning of what they're doing every day.
Nice.
Victoria asked the four
Yes.
parts of Ikigai. And I would say it's what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and is willing to pay for it.
And I'll put in a plug for your book that in the purpose section, Victoria, you'll find much more detail about Ikigai and how this fits into the broader model for happiness. So yeah, we have time for one more question. We have a question from Adrian. She asks, how can we measure our happiness?
Beautiful. So look, happiness is defined as subjective well-being, and as luckily, we are not as happy as we should be, even though we have so many measures and so many books written on happiness. So I would say 2 measures that you can look at. On the individual side, I would look at the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire. It's available for free. It's in my book, but you can also directly go to the Oxford site and you can actually do that questionnaire to say, how happy am I? If you get a 7.5 and you say, hey, I'm pretty happy, that's the average. And this work is not about being happy. It's about being happier. It's about being more resilient when we have suffering. It's about being joyful, not experiencing joy. We all experience the if then else joy moments. If I get a promotion, I get happy. It just doesn't stay. That goes to what are the 4 determinants that make us happy. So if we really wanted to measure something, what could we measure? And those are, does my life have meaning? Do I find meaning in my life? Don't ask the question meaning of life, meaning in life. Second, do I have a rich community? Do I have rich relationships? The quality and quantity, am I spending enough time with those? Am I happy with them? Third, how am I doing physically, mentally, and spiritually, my well-being? A really big determinant of happiness. And fourth is emotional mastery. Walking the middle path between aversion and craving all the things that, quote unquote, bring us the emotion of happiness, joy, and aversion to all those things that bring us suffering. If we can learn to walk the middle path and regulate our emotions, depending on how well we are doing around those 4, we can build our ability to be happier. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it satisfying to know that there's a plan and that I have a goal in mind for my own
Yeah,
happiness, right? With
exactly.
intention comes reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, we experience the entire world we experience, Michelle, as you and I have talked. We create our own experience. Our brains create every emotion and every thought from prior. We create it. Nobody else can create. The external world can provide us stimulus, but the experience we create moment to moment is our own. And so the science of happiness is about how we can get masterful about this amazing prediction making machine, our brains and our body, this unbelievable source of wisdom, to truly craft our own experience so we can be joyful regardless of what's happening out there and respond with agency. I choose, we choose, and collectively we make a difference.
And what a difference that would make in the world.
Yeah.
So thank you truly, Ashish Kothari, for your time today, sharing your wisdom, sharing the real science behind all of this wisdom, and for publishing a terrific book, Hardwired for Happiness. I highly suggest folks go out and get it. And thank you again for your time.
Of course, such a pleasure, Michelle, to be with you and the rest of the C4C group. Thank you.
Great, thank you.